Hi, everybody. Welcome to Cheer Chat. Tonight is a little late, so I apologize. And excuse me while I scoot things out of the way. Excited to chat with you guys because we did a state of the industry survey, and I'm eager to share and discuss the results. I've also had a chance to research kind of the situation with the lawsuit for the former Sacramento Kings dancers that was brought. And I've also heard from a lot of you about just some, I would say, working conditions with the Sacramento Kings dancers that were, for me, even more alarming than the lawsuit that was filed. So we're going to get into all of that. I just want to address a few housekeeping items, and pardon me while sorry, YouTube land, but I need to adjust my little situation. Okay, that's my Christmas present to myself, is to get a better setup. But until then, it is what it is. I'm going to take a sip, and then I'm going to discuss some housekeeping. What I'm calling housekeeping. I got a big glass today. I hope you guys are ready for like a little more of an extended, take my time. I have pages and pages of notes. You guys know how I do, but I'll try to keep it brief. All right, housekeeping item number one is just to thank everybody who participated in the survey. This was really, again, celebrating my 5-year anniversary last week. I really was kind of unsure after all of the years that I've been doing this and talking about issues in our space, really like if we've progressed as an industry. When I say industry, I mean pro cheer and dance. If we've really, made it past a lot of the issues that were covered early on in the podcast, or if there were certain things that you guys were still experiencing on these teams that needed to be brought back to the forefront in terms of discussion. And so I just really want to thank everybody for taking the time and sharing the survey so that people can participate and we can get some meaningful results to talk through tonight. I take your voice extremely seriously. I thank everybody who also, trusted me to reach out anonymously to discuss some of the concerns that they had with their teams. Again, I just take it very seriously, and I understand that my role is to listen and not judge, do my own research, right, as well, just based on what's publicly available. And also just to kind of think through things from different perspectives, multiple perspectives, right? If you guys don't know my background as an attorney, that's what I'm trained to do, right? So I'm constantly seeking out truth and multiple sources of said truth, taking into account, like I said, where others may be coming from, just looking at it from all angles, right? So for those of you who may not know, the purpose of this platform, this podcast, is to kind of talk about the fun stuff, the state of the industry, things that are going on in our space, but also just to use the platform to provide a safe space for people to voice concerns about what it's like being on these teams. The podcast is called Pro Cheerleading Podcast, The Truth Behind the Palms, right? So we know that what we may see out there in terms of like what's on the website or social media may not always be the actual truth of what's going on in your experience. And so that's part of what this podcast is for, just trying to create that safe space where people can, whether it's anonymously or just coming forward, sharing their experience, whether it's interviews or going live together. That's really what this platform is about. Whenever there's an issue that I feel like is important enough to address on this platform, I do make a serious attempt to do my research. Again, I love to analyze issues, as I stated before. And basically, I speak on what I've researched, what I've observed in this space. I speak on it freely, and I say freely like with heavy emphasis on freely. It's my thoughts, my opinion. My name is Makiba LaShare Pate. I'm entitled to that, and that's what I do on my platform, right? And I try to speak on these things because I do have the luxury of not being on a team, not pursuing a role on a team or position on a team. And so there are things that I'm able to say more freely than others can. And I definitely, like I said, take that stewardship a little I'm not a little, very seriously, because advocacy is important to me. Um, and I also just do it because I can say whatever the hell I want to on my platform. Um, that's just a hard stop. And you guys may wonder why I'm coming off a little stank, but I had to calm down because um, basically, under no circumstances, I just want to be really clear to everybody who's like listening. I think for the people who know me, I think maybe you already understand this, but this is just like a little PSA that you don't have to like what I have to say. You don't have to like how I handle things. You don't have to listen. You don't have to. This is a free country. The truth is the truth. And I do leave this platform open to pursue the truth and for people to share their truth. And you can't get mad at the truth. When we started this podcast, it was the truth behind the palms because everybody has their own experience, but like facts are facts. Like it either happened or it didn't happen. And like the truth is the truth, right? I just want to be very, very clear that absolutely, under no circumstances whatsoever, should anybody ever DM me and basically have the audacity to imply that I need their consent to speak on anything on this platform. Okay. I don't have to have anybody's consent, permission, approval, or anything to voice anything that I feel is worthy of discussion on this platform. Period, point blank in the story. What I have to say is not subject to anybody's thoughts, opinions, or like approval or consent. Like I'm really offended by that. I had to calm down. I will continue to sip my wine. But that's just not how this platform works. That's not how I get down, period. That's just not how I flow. And I'm not going to like tolerate any sort of like intimidation or buzzwords that suggest that I actually have to consult or like get consent from somebody to speak on things that are important. Okay. That's just needed to be said. I mean it with my full chest. And I never tolerated any sort of intimidation. I've spoken out very clearly on like so many issues, and that's just how I get down. And I don't want it to be misconstrued in any way. I'm saying what I'm saying on this platform. It was probably better than me actually responding to the DM, but I just want to make it clear, especially because we are going to touch on some sensitive topics, that this just is how I get down. Okay, everybody's saying, oh, I might need to read, huh? Okay, somebody's saying period. You're good, period. Okay, we're all in consensus here. Okay, I figured you guys probably knew me well enough to know. The other aspect that I'll just touch on briefly is just that, you know, I have love for all of you. There are relationships with you as dancers, current, former, aspiring. Like I hear from all of you guys. There are also relationships with different coaches that I've had on the podcast. Like I'm an open book and open to everybody, but I won't be disrespected. And I'm going to seek out the truth. I think there's sometimes just difficult conversations, and I'm not afraid to have them, right? I'm not afraid to share the truth. So these survey results are a little like woo, woo, woo. So I think there's some ugly truths that we have to talk about. Um, and there's some situations with the Sacramento Kings dancers with the lawsuit, as well as other things that I've been hearing about that are a little bit ugly too. So tonight we're just gonna get dirty and ugly. I'm going to try to stick to what I believe in terms of my decorum and my professionalism, my values, and not get as stank as I was feeling like an hour or two ago. Because the intent is not to be messy and to like say things about people when they're not necessarily here to defend themselves, etc. But it's just I'm a professional, but I'm not to be tried in that way. Just we're done with that topic. Okay. We love you. I miss what you said, but we support you. Yeah, it just needed to be said, but I'm going to move off of that topic because I said what I said and I stand by it. Do you guys want to discuss the survey results first or get into the Sacramento Kings lawsuit and situation first? I am going to use the interactive chat here and see what people put in there because I'm prepared for either one. But the lawsuit conversation, because I'm a lawyer, you guys, I am digging into the complaint. I reviewed the complaint and I do have like some thoughts. I wanted to kind of lay it out for you guys so it's a little more academic-ish. Not like I'm taking you to law school, trust, but It's a little bit more in depth. So should we go through the survey results? I'm hearing survey. Okay, then let me drink. And this is a big glass, but it was necessary. Survey results. It sounds like anybody in YouTube land? Okay. All right, we'll start with the survey because, you know, when I thought about the survey questions, I was kind of like, we have podcast episodes about these topics. Oh, somebody said lawsuit. Okay, well, you outnumbered, love. I'm sorry. But we'll get into it and I'll try to be like, keep it pushing. But I mean, I look back at all of the podcast episodes, there's over 100 of them. And I thought, like, there's got to be some movement on this, right? This happened so long ago and things have got to be better by now, and et cetera, et cetera. So I thought that I would kind of categorize the questions based on like topics that were discussed, right? So I'm going to read the question. It was like true or false. And people get to like, indicate whether they agree with the statement or not. I'm just trying to make sure the rest of my stuff is in order. All right, it is. Or it is not, but I'll get it there. Give me a second, y'all. Is the rose kicking in already? Oh, okay, here we are. All right, survey results. First question I asked was, or the statement I should say that I said was, I am fairly compensated for the duties I perform. And this obviously is in your role as a pro cheerleader or dancer. You guys know that the survey, I've had to try to keep it open to alumni because what I realize is that a lot of people suffer through stuff on these teams and they don't come back, they get cut, whatever happens. And so I wanted it to be open to alumni as well. So during your time on a team, you're speaking to whether these statements are true or false. So 35% said that that was true, that they feel that they're fairly compensated for the duties they perform. 65% said that was false. I feel like Jerry Springer. The lie detector determined that was a lie. Okay, so what does this mean? We all want to raise, is what I'm hearing, right? Like the pay and the pay structure of how dancers are currently compensated is not probably meeting your needs from a financial perspective. We're in like, you guys know what this like economy is like right now. Ish is expensive everywhere. I feel you if you're feeling like maybe the pay that you're receiving is not sufficient to like account for what you do in your role. We did a compensation survey a while back so that people could share what they are paid as part of their teams to see if there was any sort of consensus or like standard that we can all aspire to. Happy to bring that bad boy out and update the information. A lot of it's hourly wages, a lot of it's tied to minimum wage. We know that some teams rise above and are treated differently. Most teams have learned from lawsuits to know that you have to be compensated for all the time that you spend doing your role. But overall, it sounds like people are just not feeling the amount. My question to you guys is, what would you say is a reasonable hourly wage or salary to pay professional cheerleaders and dancers? Put it in the chat. Let's start spitting some numbers out there. I really do think it would be great for us to, I mean, of course, with the survey, I couldn't ask a million questions, but I think a follow-up question that I'd like you guys all to think about is, what would be a reasonable amount? Should it be based on, the cost of living in your city? Somebody says depends on where you live. That's a very valid point. Maybe within like places like New York City, San Francisco, or, LA, that you should make more just based on market. It's a conversation that I hope we can spitball some numbers, like minimum. I mean, shouldn't you make the same, if not more, of somebody who works at McDonald's? Not knocking McDonald's workers, but let's see if we get some answers here. 20 to 35, depending on where you live. So an hourly wage of 20 to 35 an hour. I mean, I see fast food jobs that are around the $20 an hour mark. So I think it's just, or people who work in the stadiums. Anytime these articles come out about compensation in our space, they are citing mascot salaries, they're citing stadium workers. And I think if not on par, it should be more than maybe some of those positions of other workers in the stadium on game day. Somebody says with health insurance, we didn't even touch on benefits, okay? I'm seeing 30 per hour minimum. I like that. I like that. I mean, obviously with football, you have bigger squads than you do in the NBA, but I just think you guys are definitely worth that much minimum. 30 an hour. Let's just marinate on that. You could keep putting numbers in the chat. I'll even come back to it and spit it out. You guys don't know what I'm talking about. But let's get to the next question. My team has rules that are fairly applied to everyone. This was about as like high level as I can get with trying to basically say, does your team operate from a management perspective where there are favorites and just that nonsense, like the same people being picked for everything, whether it's social media coverage and they're just constantly posting the same people put in the front of formation, same people selected as captain, the same people going on all the appearances. Like, does your team, I mean, that's not really a rule per se, but like, when you have favorites like that, if they're breaking the rules, they're more often than not treated in the same way that a regular person on the team would be treated. And I don't mean to trivialize it. I'm just saying that this is really is they're getting at is their favoritism, and the results were 35% true and 65% false. To me, that kind of speaks to management. Like maybe coaches have like their favorites and whatnot, but like how you manage and apply rules and establish that like morale as a team where you know that everybody's going to be held accountable to the same standard. That's what I was hoping to see a different number here. Like 65% saying that's false is pretty pathetic. Okay, let's see what the comments are saying. Honestly, a pro athlete is a pro athlete. Just because we are dancers doesn't mean we are not pros. The guys get paid. And somebody says what she said. I completely agree. I just, again, use it. I mean, I think every team should analyze what they pay their mascot because they're paying their mascot to interact with the fans, to walk around and boisterously jump around and entertain in their costume. And I just don't really see why there should be any difference in pay for the entire team that does way more than that and builds the brand and does all the things. And so that should be like benchmark for some of those conversations. It's not like they have to do a market analysis. What are you paying your mascot? Okay, let's just start there and let's open that conversation up and, work from there. I third that statement, somebody says. So we're all agreeing in Instagram land, YouTube land, I'll just try to keep you plugged into the conversation. Okay. Pay us. Yes. And I guess to my point I've made probably in the episode about bitch better have my money, where Brittany and I were talking about this a lot. I just think you guys can be brought to the table for ideas of brainstorming of ways to bring like revenue into your program. Like I'm sure you guys have ideas of how you could make some money and make that money actually go spread to your team. Not like you guys need to be selling chocolate bars, but damn it, if you know that you could put on a clinic and you guys can organize it a certain way, everybody's sharing it, promoting it, like, and you actually get to share in like the proceeds of that. It's kind of like feeding into your pay in some form or fashion. Like there's some creative ways to figure out where the money's coming from if teams are being cheap. Okay. Favoritism is huge. I feel it always has been. Yeah, and I really don't know in terms of like ways of addressing that. It's like how is that feedback even like shared back with the director to say as a team like let's just call a spade a spade. Like we know that you tend to have the same people in the same whatever. Like however it just needs to be stated and like can you just collectively talk about how it's kind of bullshit like especially when those ones that are like favorites literally put their foot off the gas because they know they can get away with it. Like it'd be one thing if the favorites were just like, oh, I can't help it, she just likes me and picks me for everything and so sorry, but like more often than not they just end up taking advantage of that level of favor and using it as leverage to bully people to I don't know, it affects the morale of everybody and I just wish that directors understand how that impacts the team and we're not a bunch of babies crying about like I'm not your favorite. It's more like this is bullshit. Like let's just okay, here we go, let me just drink some rosé. But with some of these results it's just kind of like it is what it is situation. It's like why are we operating a team an employment setting in that kind of like I don't even know an equivalent. Like, this is just not, it's not professional to run a team that way, right? It's difficult to prove, but it's there. Completely agree. You want things to be fair. I get it. Yeah. Hey, life is not fair. We're performing a job and maybe we're not going to be given all the opportunities, but there's some simple shit that they can do in the way that they choose to manage that, like, at least gives the appearance of fairness, right? Like, anyway, the next question. I don't experience or witness any body shaming. The results on this were 61% said true, 39% said false. And at first I was just like, okay, that's pretty good. I feel like that's better than where I would have guessed it to be when, 5 years ago when I started the podcast. But somebody made a good comment, just that, like, it's probably to the point now where it's so internalized in dancers, like the body shaming dialogue that you hear in your head, where it doesn't even have to be stated anymore. I mean, we did have plenty of lawsuits that address body shaming and that type of behavior, by the teams and their management. So maybe it's just like they're not saying it, they're not putting you on a scale, but you just know that the expectation is there and it doesn't even have to be said anymore. But I don't know that people are getting benched for not having the right physique, or how the body shaming is actually happening. But the number 39% is rather high. And I'd love to hear more from you guys of how the body shaming shows up. Like, are we back at the absolutely unacceptable jump up and down to do a jiggle test? Are they actually critiquing your body and saying you can't dance this game because your body's not right? How are they addressing physical fitness in terms of, like, maybe you aren't performing at the level that you should because you're out of shape and you're not working out or taking care of yourself? I'd love to hear from you guys as to what that actually means in terms of the body shaming. Um, and we'll just open that conversation again. I should have wrote down podcast episodes. I forget what we called the weight episode. Dang it. It'll hit me. But we can reopen the conversation. Maybe times have changed. Maybe people are getting slicker about the way they're delivering feedback about people's bodies, or maybe they just are flat out just balls out with it and are saying things that are actually very humiliating and publicly in front of your teammates. How is it being delivered? Follow-ups, right? Oh, they get cut. Ooh. Mm. Um, Sizing uniforms incorrectly when they have sizes. I'm sorry, you already. Oh, when they have sizes for you, but they're giving you the incorrect size instead of directly letting you know how they feel. So wait a minute. So they're giving you uniforms that, like, are too small for you as a way of kind of communicating that you're not where they want you to be. Is that what the hell's going on in these streets? That would be rather interesting if that's the tactic. I expect you to fit into this tiny, tiny little uniform that's not your size, and that's the way they make you feel uncomfortable about your size and shape when they have an actual uniform that can actually fit you. I don't like that at all. Somebody says, "Oh dang," that's not cool. And I said it the last episode, a lot of these uniforms are more and more, I mean, they're kind of like steering back more towards the sexy side, and, sheer outfits and cat suits and a lot of things that are definitely kind of revealing people's bodies. Like, that was shunned for a couple years over the past 5 years, and now it's back. If that's the form of kind of enforcing body expectations or a form of body shaming, to use the uniform almost as a weapon is really troubling to hear. But let's keep those conversations going. You guys know you can hit me up and just kind of elaborate. I know we're in this space. I know it's already 9:30 and I'm still talking. I won't keep y'all all night, but I do think some of these just warrant a little follow-up action. Let's go to the next one. My team shows and proves that it values diversity. 67% said true, 33% said false. I honestly wasn't sure where this one was going to be. Like, I was pleased that it was as high as it was, of 67%, like, knowing that there are I think that's a little bit of an improvement from 5 years ago. I'll just say that. Um, that's a step in the right direction. I think teams like I put show and prove in that question for a reason. It's like, but diversity can be a big buzzword, but are you seeing or feeling as a person on the squad that this is something that's truly valued? 67% I think is pretty decent. Obviously, I definitely care about the latter percentage, right? Of like the 37 or the 33 or whatever it might be, but I'm just trying to highlight at least places where I was like a little surprised or, you know, it's a little bit more promising than I was expecting. I had low expectations for this one, not because I'm not seeing it and covering this space, but just because I know that sometimes once you are on these teams, despite the numbers and people being on squads, that the treatment isn't always great if you are a minority on the team. Somebody else said shocking of the 67%. Okay, so I'm not crazy. All right. But we do get into questions around discrimination later. So we'll see what it's like to actually be on a team and making sure that these numbers are, like what's the word, relative to each other. Matter of fact, I'm going to go out of order. Let's talk about that. I do not experience slash witness racial discrimination. 66% said true, 34% said false. So in my mind, they are kind of like in the same ballpark of 60, above 60% or above 65% saying true. I feel like I'm in math class and I'm going to drink based on that because I do not do numbers. But in my mind, the breakdown around I don't experience or witness discrimination on the basis of gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, age, or religion. Similarly, 62% say this is true and 38% say it's false. So if we're looking at the stat of like teams valuing diversity and it's in the same ballpark, that to me suggests that, we're probably in that space of like roughly 70% of teams are getting it and doing a good job of, showing that they value diversity and treating people accordingly when they make it onto the teams. I'm going to go with that because that's higher than I was expecting and it's consistent across the other responses that we're kind of getting at that. The next question I'm going to go to is I do not experience or witness bullying. 48% said true and 52% said false. And I think I wanted to like throw my pin at this one. Like I wrote in all caps, why? Like, what are we doing as grown-ups to be bullying people? Like, this is if you experience it or witness it. And I just don't understand bullying in this context, especially because here we are. I just feel like it's like not like Miss America or Mr. America in terms of like this desire to be the best version of yourself, be all you can be. It just seems like so like the polar opposite of what you're projecting as the standard and image of a brand ambassador that you want making your teams. You do these interviews where you are weeding out people who don't seem to have great character. And then you get people on your team and then you just allow them to bully people. Like people are being like having their entire experience as a pro cheerleader or dancer ruined because they have a bully on their team. Like, what are we doing? Like, I don't even that one makes me upset because it's just like we're all adults too, right? Like, where is this bullying mentality like actually coming from? And it makes me think of like, hey, some of these squads are, have young people, and I didn't do competitive cheer and competitive dance, but maybe there's some, you know, dance moms or crazy ass dance studios or this culture with competitive cheer and dance and how people are trained and then they bring that nasty attitude and behavior to the pro space and for whatever reason it doesn't get stamped out. I just don't get that one. Like, how do you really feel about yourself if you are actually having to exert your privilege or authority as a captain or whatever it is to bully other people? Like, it just makes me think that obviously that speaks to leadership in terms of like the directors understanding that this type of environment exists and they aren't like squashing it, like hands down, full stop, cut this shit out. Okay, see, now I'm sounding like somebody's mama. It's sickening when a coach supports those who bully. Bullies and favoritism can go hand in hand sometimes. Yeah, the favorites bully. They know that they're not going to get called out for it. They get away with it. But it's so whack. Like, it's just so whack on so many levels. And I want to say to those who are being bullied, I know I did an episode about this as well. Mean Girls was the title of that episode. I'm too old to remember all 100 plus titles, but I do know we call that one Mean Girls. If you are on a team and you're getting bullied, maybe there's like a slightly tolerable amount of bullshit that you can accept just because you're not really letting it like penetrate and phase you, right? You don't have this pit in your stomach when you roll up to practice. You're not letting whatever they're saying to you to bully you penetrate your psyche where you feel like shit about yourself and you feel like you're always doing something wrong or whatever they're doing and saying to bully you. But I really strongly urge you, if you have been bullied to the point where you wanted to quit, where you cry after practices, where you raise it to the director and nobody's listening or doing anything about it. If you're on a team where everybody's watching you get bullied and nobody's saying anything, or they're just kind of like, dang girl, that's messed up on the side, but not like, that's just not okay. I hope you know it's not okay. Like, the thought of people kind of like stepping out of the matrix when they retire, or just being so tortured in the way that they're treated that they like don't want to come back and they just get like kind of pushed out. And then they kind of start processing all of this. I'm hearing people going to therapy and having to address how they're being treated on these teams. And it's just like, it's serious. I'm not trying to like, you know, minimize the trauma that it causes, but I'm just kind of like, we have to figure out how to use our voices to really combat this. Like, there's just no excuse for you being treated this way in this professional environment. I just can't condone it. I really can't. And you have rights to kind of document your treatment. You can have, screenshots and recorded, whatever you need to do to kind of establish that this is the like pattern of abusive behavior on your team. And that is not, I get HR departments are HR departments. Sometimes they're effective, sometimes they're not. We'll get into a little bit of that when we're talking about the lawsuit here. But overall, I just hope you know that it's not you. Whatever they're saying should not ring as true for you. And I know if you get beat down so much, you're going to start to kind of like internalize that and believe that. But you got to kind of fight back, like legit fight back. It's just unacceptable. Listen to the Mean Girls episode. I went off in depth about that in particular. But I was very disappointed to see the stat. 52%, like half the people out there in our world are just being bullied or have seen bullying. Why are we giving them that power? I don't get it. Fuck that. I said it. Okay. The next question, because I lump the discrimination ones together, is I am comfortable voicing concerns with my director. 50% said true, 50% said false. This is, it's one of those ones that I think it's almost reasonable that there might be like an even split here. Leadership roles are so important, you guys, right? Like, who is in charge of the teams, who's captaining, that is not a word, but I'll just drink on that. Why do I drink more when I say certain things that don't make sense? Because the rose maybe helps me make more sense. Who knows? It's been a long day. But I think what I'm seeing with this result is just that, obviously, depending on the leader, right, you're going to feel comfortable raising these types of concerns that we're talking about. And, 50-50 split is not, it's not great, but I know why you guys have that sense of hesitation around voicing concerns to your leadership. Let's see. Unfortunately, dancers are afraid that their tenure with their organization will be cut short. So they just don't talk. This was my Shut Up and Dance episode, probably episode number 2 or 3 for the podcast. I think it was the second one. There is this culture of fear. That's why I started out thanking you guys, even for participating. There's this culture of fear that by speaking up and saying anything, that your whole career is ruined, that you'll never make another team, that you're going to get cut. There is this, fear of retaliation. blackballing, etc. And I don't want to again minimize that that's not a real thing, but at the same time, I just I don't want to feed into that mindset and that mentality because it's just going to allow the oppressive, abusive behavior to continue because they're banking on you not speaking up, or they think they can intimidate you, like somebody was foolish enough to think earlier that I already addressed. That actually will create this environment where people will be scared to speak up, or they create this division between the team and going to HR that, like, maybe the team's going to disappear if you bring up issues. So you bring them to me, and then I get to pick and choose whether I do anything about it or not. Like, there's a lot of dynamics here, um, or threatening us to not speak up. Wow. Well, that's problematic even more so. That if your leadership is actually voicing and threatening you with your spot of not speaking up. This is like tyrant behavior, you guys. It's not normal. It's not like a healthy leadership style. I just think there's a lot of weeding and seeding that probably needs to happen at the leadership level. Just saying. Okay. And I think for, some of the directors, it's a question of what kind of organization and what kind of culture that you want to have on your team, and does it reflect your overall team's values and just of the organization as a whole. When you think of certain organizations like Warriors, for example, or just Warriors is probably the best example, right? You kind of have a feeling of what the team stands for. And there should be like a trickle down effect because from the top down, they're asserting that this is what this brand is about. This is how we treat people. This is how we show up, blah, blah, blah. And I think the directors are in that position to figure out what kind of team they want to run. Do you want to run a team in a way where only half of them feel comfortable, like they can come up to you and say something if there's an issue or a problem? Or do you want that number to be higher? That like 80 to 90% feel like even if it's a difficult conversation, that you have an open door, that you're going to hear them out. That's just something it starts with the leadership and what kind of culture they're trying to cultivate. It's either going to be a culture of fear or the opposite, right? The next question was, if I do raise serious concerns/issues, my director listens and takes action to resolve it. 46% said this is true. 54% said this was false. Um, and obviously, they kind of go hand in hand. I think the numbers are close enough to hovering around the 50-50-ish mark that even if you do say something, the concern is that people don't really feel like anything's going to be done about it. And that theme also comes up in the lawsuit that we'll get into shortly. But either way, that's not very comforting, right? Like if you have a problem, if you experience some of these issues on the team, that open door policy and that openness and communication it goes hand in hand with that, right? People have to feel comfortable enough to raise concerns and address things either one-on-one or having team meetings to discuss things. Like the football players do it. I mean, you saw the leadership change with the Raiders. Like they want a pulse on how the players feel about their leaders. And I'm not trying to bring the Raiders into it, but it sounds like people were voicing concerns about the prior coach and he was gone. So, I mean, not to say I'm not trying to hop up in Raiders business. I'm just using that as an example that like the players, the athletes themselves do have these kind of like team meetings and conversations and ways of providing feedback on coaching styles that either work or don't work. And I think that's very healthy. Okay. Next question. We only have a couple more. My team enables me to prepare for my future dance career post retirement. I threw this one in there because I was just curious based on some of the trends that I'm seeing. Teams are allowed, like tagging people's personal Instagram accounts. It looks like people are getting access to more footage that they're able to post performance clips of them at games, that they're relaxing some of those rules around like you not being able to leverage your role as a professional dancer or cheerleader to like set yourself up for success in your pro career, like whatever it is that you're trying to pursue. So the results on this one were very staggering, and I want to open it up to you guys to get your thoughts. But 25% felt that statement was true. 75% said false. This was the most staggering result above the 60-ish percentage points, 75% said that is false. They do not feel that their team is preparing them or allowing them to prepare for their future as a professional dancer. I really think this is like a follow-up conversation on what you guys think that they should be doing, that they're not doing, what restrictions you feel are getting in the way of you preparing. Like, this industry shouldn't chew you up and spit you out, not with everything that you like sacrifice and invest as being part of these teams. So, what should they be doing differently? What do you want, your team to do to help prepare or enable you to prepare for a career after you retire? What's a reasonable expectation around like certain rules or restrictions being lifted? Like, what do we want there? I think that's a follow-up conversation. Feel free to DM me and send me your thoughts on that one. But that was a really whopping 75% saying, nope, not the case. And it, to me, obviously speaks to there being some form of like expectation of something that should be different. And I want to know what's in y'all's way, or what are the teams not doing? Okay. I think it depends on what dancers' goals are after pro dance, because sometimes that is the goal. Yeah. I mean, some people want to coach, some people want to choreograph, some people want to just post things so that they can kind of build their exposure. Some people may want access or help with maybe getting a representation by an agency. Maybe people just want information sessions or like some kind of mentoring where they have an agency come and talk to them about, hey, this is how you transition into a pro career. I'm just throwing things out there. But depending on what it is that you want to do, especially if it's in the area of dance, I think having some kind of like open dialogue around like, hey, if somebody's interested in coaching one day, can they shadow you once they retire? Or, you know what I mean? Like, why not use this as like a mentoring or a training ground so that people are able to pursue those goals once they retire? We were lucky because our director is a working creative director in the industry, and we always had working choreographers come on and set pieces for us. Our director also books girls on professional gigs. I think location is a big factor too. Separate comments, but I'm just reading them all. That's great. I think it's just that level of exposure, right? Like, and the directors actually having those connections to actually bring people to your dancers, or or having that relationship even in your dance community where um, you can bridge outside of just like our pro space. Maybe you want to do musical theater, who knows? But like, just having this sense of like we are bringing um, professionals in the professional setting into like be guest choreographers so that you're getting that exposure. um, I think there's plenty that they can do. Obviously they have a lot on their plate, I'm not saying, but I think us being able to try to articulate what that could look like, or like I said, if there are rules that are like restricting people's ability to really truly be able to market themselves or take on work while they're on the team. I think those are some things that hopefully we can flesh out with more discussion so we could kind of articulate what the hell it is that we actually expect, since that number is so staggering. The next question was, and keep the comments coming, I'll try my best to read them, that there's a fair audition process to make the team. 67% said true, 33% said false. We have a comment. Also, I truly believe some coaches get offended if they think a dancer is using a pro team as a stepping stone to something bigger. Let's talk about that, because I feel like sometimes even in like the interview process, they try to like sense whether somebody wants to do this or be on this team because they want to be on this team, and they just like, I just love this team so much. And or if they are kind of like boldly saying like that this is something that would be a stepping stone because they ultimately want to do X. I think you're so spot on that like that almost comes across as a red flag. Oh no, my little light did not go off. I guess it was not charged. You guys can still see me. This is my ratchet setup. Okay. Fine then. But I think that it's really curious that they would take that position. Do you guys see that as like a negative, that people have goals and aspirations after they cheer? Like, I think it's reasonable that you might want maybe you won't like articulate it as a stepping stone, but what is wrong with you having ambitions after your pro career and being able to prepare for that while you're on a team? Um, I just think it shouldn't be viewed as a negative. I'm a little, what do you guys think? And there is that little on the other hand, right? Like people who clearly are trying to like build that social media following, maybe because they want to be able to monetize their content and they need to be able to post and really sell that they're a dancer for X organization because they're trying to be that person. I'm not knocking anybody who's a ambassador or whatever the hell influencer kind of situation, but sometimes it does feel like there's a little bit of a clash if that's somebody's main motivation versus actually taking in the experience in a different way. But I just think that's the day and age we live in. That's just what people are doing for, their hustle, and the whole like using it as a stepping stone is just kind of like it is what it is. Everybody's got some kind of like goal in mind, and it should be a safe space to kind of articulate that that's what you want to be able to do, whatever that is, and you want to be able to leverage your role on the team to be able to do that. It's not a negative, especially because you can't dance slash cheer forever. Amen to that. Like, it's a limited time offer, okay? Like, there's no expiration date on dancing, but we know that our tenure on these teams, 2 to 5 years, you're lucky if you get beyond that, but like, it's limited. It's a limited window. People are getting older or having life changes, and you kind of like have to hit it, strike while the iron's hot, and really go hard for your goals and be able to make moves. I think there's teams that I've interviewed, Chrisia from Brooklyn Nets, it's their entertainment director, that knows that some of their dancers get picked up for tours and jobs and opportunities, and she wants that for her dancers. And I just think it's the mindset of the person leading the team and the flexibility that they have in maybe their rules around. I mean, NBA is so different because there's 50 million games, but I do think that we've had conversations about directors that are a little bit more flexible and open so that people can build their careers for the time that they're not dancing anymore. So maybe it's kind of based on city, but we're part of a broader dance community, and I do think that there's a missed opportunity there if teams aren't utilizing that outreach as a way of opening doors for people to do things post graduation, post their dance career. So thanks for the comments, y'all. Keep them coming. Where am I? Oh, I said it, but I didn't tell you the numbers. The next question is, there is a fair audition process to make the team. 67% said true and 33% said false. So for the most part, especially in with the world of like virtual auditions and whatnot, maybe we've all reached a space where we're kind of like used to the new world order. People are more or less feeling like it's true that they're run fairly. 33% saying false. To me, this seems like almost like the norm a little bit based on the results. It's kind of like having that kind of split. So I would consider that to be pretty positive if it's over 60%. The last question, y'all got to talk to me, is I like the direction that the pro cheer dance industry has been heading over the past 5 years. Again, this was all couched in, it's been 5 years. I've had my anniversary last week of having the podcast, and I've noticed a lot of things that have changed in our space in the last 5 years. And I wanted to know from you guys, do you think these are like that we're in the right direction? Are people like, hell no, we need to about, like, I don't know. So the results were 46% said this is true, and 54% said false, that they do not like the direction that the pro space is heading. And I just wrote, what does this really mean? Like, what is it that we're concerned about? What trends are we seeing that we're not feeling? What is like the concern or the things that we're seeing that are problematic? Like, if you could reverse time or reverse a trend, that you would go back to what? I want to have a deeper dive in that conversation. Feel free, if you have thoughts on that and you answered false, to kind of explain what it is that you aren't feeling about the direction that we're heading. I'm dying to know. I thought that that was going to be answered a lot differently. I thought it was going to probably be like that 60-30-ish split. For it to be half and half or a little bit more than half and half, and it being like false was just kind of like, damn, well, how do we really feel about our space, you guys? Like, are we feeling it, not feeling it? What are the pros and cons? We'll have to figure out how to get that additional feedback. But that kind of wraps the survey results, and I'm seeing the time, and I ain't even gotten into the lawsuit situation. So you guys have to let me know what you're up for. Too much to type. We need a book on this. Yeah, I mean that question is pretty high level. There's just kind of like an overall, are you satisfied with the industry question? So I know that it's probably so many layers to that, but I just am curious, like, because there are certain trends, right? Like, if people had to pinpoint it's this that's actually going the wrong direction, what would they say? So I welcome you to anonymously or otherwise just kind of like bullet point out or just talk to me about like what you think is just not a good direction to be heading in and why. And maybe I can just kind of share that out the next time I go live. I love when people send me audio notes. I know sometimes it is too much to type, and then the minute on Instagram goes real fast. But maybe it's just something you want to send a little audio note because it's easier to sometimes just like spit it out. But doing a time check here, I'm gonna take a sip of wine. You guys let me know if you want me to continue to get into this lawsuit. I can try to, speed through it and shit, but it's not just the lawsuit. It's actually like other things that people have told me about the organization. I want to give it due justice and time. Y'all know that I tend to go on and on and on. Well, not really on and on and on, but I don't care about having like a long IG session, but I just want you to let me know if you think I should break it up, like talk to me or just go for it. Anyone? Anyone? All right, if y'all don't say anything, I'm just gonna get it off my chest tonight. Hold now, speak now, forever hold your peace. Let's get into it. Sacramento Kings dancers. Okay, there was a lawsuit that was filed last week by two former dancers, and they did not identify themselves in their lawsuit. I reviewed their lawsuit. I have it here in front of me. I have lots of notes from it. I think their lawyer gave away some. Oh, continue, please. Okay, here we go. The lawyer, I think, almost gave away some information that would make it very easy to identify who one of the plaintiffs is, but I did not, make an attempt to try to identify who the plaintiffs are. They named the defendants, so like the people that are being sued or the entities that are being sued are Matthew Day, who I understood was like a guest choreographer slash consultant slash creative director, like outsider that was brought in to the organization. We'll kind of get into that a little bit later. There are all different accounts out there. Like he was the lead choreographer or like lots of different things. But I think the real true context is that he was a guest kind of creative director or something of the sort, a consultant. In his own words, it was like an outside consultant. Okay. I read some articles, read the lawsuit. And then they also sued the Sacramento Kings organization. Those are the two defendants named in the lawsuit. I think it's important just because this is like I've covered other lawsuits in this space and probably not in the detail that I'm about to get into this one, but it's important to note that there is an individual named like as an individual, not just like when teams have like or plaintiffs have sued their team, they aren't like naming the directors or you know what I mean? Like this one actually does name an individual. And the timing, they haven't even been served with the lawsuit. So there hasn't been the appropriate like due process for them to actually provide a response where I could like review that and research that and be able to present what their arguments are and the facts that they're alleging in their defense. So I'm just putting that out there as the disclaimer that I don't have the other side of the story other than certain quotes from an article where the defendant, Matthew Day, kind of from his perspective shared what was going on and that he denies the allegations. But anyway, I'm not here to say whether the guy did it or did not do it. I'm kind of going off of what's in the complaint and then just information that's been shared with me, and what I've researched. Okay. So that's kind of the context of how I'm sharing information about this tonight. But like I said, the Matthew Day denies the allegations. And these are allegations. This is a civil lawsuit. It's not a criminal lawsuit. There's no guilt or innocence. But in terms of due process, people have an opportunity to respond and say, actually, I'm alleging X, Y, and Z in terms of facts. So I'm going to be sharing the allegations that are in the lawsuit, kind of talking through the legal claims and what they're asserting, and giving my 2 cents. Okay, here we go. You guys did chime in. Continue, please, and you're ready. So here we go. Buckle up, Buttercup. Okay. The lawsuit alleges essentially like 3 claims. One is sexual harassment by the choreographer. Let's just call him the choreographer, okay? Like not the main one, not the lead one, but whatever. Consultant choreographer, whatever. The next claim is disability discrimination in the way that the audition process was handled due to one of the plaintiff's disability. Super interesting claim. We'll get into it. And the last was just retaliation because both dancers were cut and they felt that it was because they raised the allegations of sexual harassment, and the defendant was on the judging panel for auditions that happened this past August. These 2 dancers were cut, and so they're claiming that they were retaliated against. Okay. All right, so let's get into each claim and I'll talk you through my thoughts and kind of like what they're alleging, and let's just talk through, the situation on its face, right? So in terms of sexual harassment, the complaint alleges that he made the dancers feel uncomfortable, um, and created like that hostile work environment that a lot of like sexual harassment claims, it's all kind of couched in this. You created a hostile work environment where I, as an employee, felt uncomfortable. And essentially, my employer, I told you about it and you didn't do anything. And therefore, I've been harmed as a plaintiff. But their claim is that he made them feel uncomfortable by calling them love, by inappropriately touching them while they were stretching without their consent, by placing his hand or arm near near their back or near their butt. I'm going to weave in and out here with some of the comments that the defendant made in the news articles, but basically his account was just that the dancers like kind of had like a stretching exercise. Here it is. Like he recalled a practice, and this was like an article on NBC News, that like he had the dancers doing like a meditative routine, and he was like walking around and adjusting people and stretching people, like move your foot here or push down this way like any other dance instructor. That was his statement in the article. Somebody said, wow, yeah. So this behavior, he kind of gave the explanation in context, but it made people feel uncomfortable. They claim in the lawsuit that they sent an email to HR informing them about the inappropriate touching, and that multiple dancers had complained to HR, and that was either like communicated to the former coach, Christina Marquez, or communicated to HR, with multiple accounts communicated to HR. This is what they stated in the lawsuit. And that HR's response was just that they would address the matter, but essentially nothing was done. They also claim that that the choreographer sent texts and messages on social media, inviting the plaintiffs to like private dance practices and contacting them about working for promotional companies, and also making like inappropriate comments and flirty emojis on Instagram. And also that he like took photos and videos of them in practice without their consent. The context that he also gave in the article is just that the team asked him to offer advice about how to make the dance team a more professional space, that would lead to more professional opportunities for dancers. So I've heard from different people that he would often reach out to them about like promotional gigs outside of King's. And that's kind of the context in which he was reaching out and to see if they would be interested. Um, Some dancers, just so you guys know, have like reached out to me to let me know that they went to HR and tried to speak in his defense when kind of the claims came up before the lawsuit, but like when it happened real time. And we're trying to give like support of this individual. Like, again, I don't know him. I'm not trying to, again, assert whether he did it or not, but there were people who spoke in favor of him and had a different account of how this went. Um, the other thing that I will say that Day had mentioned in the article was just that, like, he said, where? He said after that incident, like with the stretching or whatever, that's at some point, somehow, somebody decided that I was a threat and decided they wanted to try to weaponize that against me. And that's like kind of like his narrative of what really happened. And I, again, have heard from people that corroborate that this was like almost like a smear campaign. So again, he hasn't responded to the complaint yet, but this is what they're alleging took place, right? So the legal claim is that his behavior, right, created a hostile work environment and that the behavior was so pervasive that it made them the working conditions like unbearable. And like any other lawsuit, it's just kind of like here you come with like, and I've been harmed just because the organization, the Sacramento Kings organization, didn't do anything. They knew about the conduct. They failed to take steps to prevent it or to stop it. And so they claim that they suffered and continue to suffer damages, anxiety, pain and suffering, substantial losses in earnings, other employment benefits, physical injuries, physical sickness, emotional distress, medical expenses, attorney fees. I think you kind of throw it all into a complaint, right? But essentially, they're claiming that this sexual harassment caused a hostile work environment. And then to tackle that on, and I'll get into it a little bit later, that by raising those claims with the organization, that they were retaliated against because they were cut from auditions and he was on a judging panel. Thoughts and reactions to claim number one around sexual harassment. I'll share mine in a sec. So, taking a step back, obviously, like anybody that's invited to, you know, not even invited. I mean, that's his claim, right? That he was asked to come to the organization to serve in that capacity to help them, figure out opportunities from a professional standpoint for the dancers. I think if there was any behavior that made the dancers feel uncomfortable, um, touching you without you, I mean, those are things that just, if people feel uncomfortable, you feel, I would say responsible to at least address that. It sounds like it was addressed to some extent. I heard there was an apology made to the team if he made anybody feel uncomfortable. But again, like, I don't know if you guys want to share your thoughts. Again, I'm not here to say whether it happened or not. This is what's in the complaint. But let's just move on because that's one piece of it, right? The next one is disability discrimination. So this one's a really, really interesting one. The auditions took place in August, okay, which is really late for NBA, by the way. The team basically announced that they were having a change in direction, that they were requiring more hip hop versus like jazz as part of the auditions process. The complaint kind of states it out that this particular plaintiff that's bringing the disability claim, that she had like auditioned the prior year, had disclosed to the former director about uh, a disability from like a knee condition. They call it a disability, they call it a disease, but essentially it required multiple surgeries. And, she presented to them that she can't do hip hop. And apparently, this is where I think he outed her a little bit, had just mentioned that the team was well aware of her disability because they had her featured in like a YouTube special about her disability. I mean, you can figure out who that was, probably based on that. Um, Somebody says, but shouldn't one ask for consent before touching anyone in any capacity? I agree with that. I think in any, like in a yoga class, if you're being pushed and stretched, like, I don't know if consent's always presented in that way. Like, can I touch you? If it really was like a meditative practice, I was seeing if in that kind of like a, um, or like physical trainers. You guys have like physical trainers that come, work out with the team. So I was thinking of it, trying to get benefited out maybe like in that lens. But yeah, I think consent is important. And if it's something where even if it wasn't like you should be able to vocalize if you really don't want to be touched. Like I'm not one for the if I don't want to be touched, I don't want to be touched. And I do think consent is important there. If that's the claim of sexual harassment, why wasn't that made when the coach would adjust us without our consent? Like this is a valid question, I guess, around like we're always touched as dancers in my mind. Like, sometimes they're doing formations and they move you out. Like, but if it's like suggestive touching, like they're alleging in terms of like touching smalls of your back or touching your butt, this is what's in the complaint. I think consent is important. And I'm not, again, trying to debate whether it's right or wrong. If I were in the shoes of somebody that, was being touched where it made me feel uncomfortable, I don't care if it's like customary or not. Like that's like a ick factor or like a line that I would have to assert some boundaries. And if it was something that kept happening or wasn't respected, then that would be problematic for me. Um, the way that they, characterized in the complaint, it was just like they were at they weren't at ease because going to practice because they weren't sure if he was going to touch them or not. I don't know. Sounds like he was at like a handful of practices, not like as many practices as you would have on an NBA team where you're like, having multiple games and multiple practices probably in a week. Um, but essentially, that's what's in the complaint. I do think consent is key. I think context is also important to take into account. And again, we're looking at the totality of what they're alleging. And again, it's kind of like this theme that it was pervasive and that they raised the issue and concern and that nothing was done about it. This is the thing with complaints, you guys. You're alleging the facts that are going to be favorable for you to make your claim and make your case. You're leaving out things that are not favorable to you. You're leaving out context. You're just stating it the way that you see it. I'd love to be able to follow up with what they respond with to provide the context. I'm only throwing things in there as a possible context or explanation based on what people have written to me to kind of like share as their perspective of what happened from either being on the team or associated with the team at the time. So again, that's why I'm offering it into the conversation, not because I'm trying to state this is the right and wrong of like what happened, because I was not there. Okay. But points are well taken. You can definitely throw more into the chat. The disability discrimination claim is essentially that auditions were held late. They were under the impression that they were going to be doing jazz. They were abruptly stunned and shocked when it was announced that they were changing direction and it was going to be more hip hop elements required versus jazz. Like they have in the lawsuit, like they were told to bring their jazz shoes. And then they were basically stunned when it was like, hey, you guys, we're going to have a change in direction and it's now going to be hip hop required for the audition. Have you had the opportunity to speak with the director in regard to this? No, I have not. This platform is open for anybody to reach out. Um, I'm not an investigative reporter. I'm reporting on like what I see is presented in the complaint and what people are, like I said, are telling me behind the scenes and otherwise as to their perspective from being on the team. The door is open. But no, I have not had the opportunity to speak with the director. She's no longer with the team, just to be clear. The person that was in role at the time of this lawsuit, but to answer your question, no. So let's see. Getting into the disability claim again, the plaintiff was required to break dance, but because of this disability, she cannot perform that. And so in the complaint, she's saying that she voiced this to the people who were running the audition just the same way that she had raised it a year ago, like reaching out to the director and the kind of like the people who were running the audition for the prior season and let them know about her disability. Again, it was featured in the YouTube special that they did on her. And so this past summer when she auditioned and she was told she had to break dance, she mentioned the disability again. And then the response in the complaint says that they claim that they didn't know about the disability and that they weren't able to modify the audition. So they don't state in the complaint whether she had to break. I mean, obviously, I'm assuming she didn't break dance because she's not capable of doing it from a physical perspective, but it's not clear exactly what happened with like the audition once she communicated that she couldn't do it. But what follows from this was just that because the choreographer was on the judging panel, um, and because of the allegations that the same plaintiff also made about the sexual harassment, that she felt that she was retaliated against for her disability when she was cut from the team. So one of the things that I wanted to raise just about the disability claim that I think is rather interesting is just the the allegation from a legal perspective that um, the Sacramento Kings failed to accommodate the disability. And there are requirements around reasonable accommodations that you have to make for your employees. And I think in an auditions context where nobody's technically, potentially not even an employee of the organization, like what are reasonable accommodations that teams should be making for people with disabilities in the audition context, right? Should you have a modified version of your dance routines that take into account a situation where you could learn that day that a dancer is not capable of doing particular components of your routine because of an injury or because of a disability? Are you kind of required, or is there an expectation under the law that if that constitutes a disability that you're going to have have some reasonable accommodation for those dancers? And I think that's an interesting question that I'd love to see answered, is like what they're actually expected to do from a legal perspective to make sure that their auditions process accommodates people with disabilities. Within every job, there are functions you must be able to perform in order to do your job. Is it fair for a team to change routines due to one person's injury? Yeah, I think it's like a fine. I don't know where that line is in terms of like legal liability around the disability laws that we have in place. Um, I think I mean, we all know that there are certain requirements around what you have to be able to do, but I don't know if directors have encountered a situation where people are saying, like, I want to audition for your team, but I have certain limitations because of a disability. And if they do communicate that, do you have a legal responsibility to try to accommodate that disability, or do you open yourself up to a disability discrimination lawsuit, especially if that person's cut in the auditions process? I think it's an interesting legal question. I don't have the answer to it, but based on this allegation, um, they're saying that, you know, they have to reasonably accommodate disabled workers. And again, I think the employment context is really speculative. Like, are they really terminating the employment if you're going through the audition process? When you're cut, is it really like a termination of employment where you're saying that you're not providing these accommodations to employees? Or is this you're not implying like providing accommodations to people who are seeking to be an employee? Like, what is the real line and of responsibility that's owed to people who are coming to an audition? I think that's just an interesting question, and I'm curious to see how it'll get shaken out. Because California is so litigious and a person is forthcoming, wouldn't one be required to accommodate? Yeah, like if they're disclosing that they have an issue or a limitation, I do think it's just an unresolved question of like that teams maybe should think about if they are in a litigious like state like California, as to how they are going to like abide by and comply with the laws when it comes to accommodating disabilities. Like I went to a dance convention and there was a deaf dancer, and she was picking up the choreography. She had her way of kind of positioning herself near the choreographers using like I didn't talk to her enough to understand like how she was able to maneuver, but they all knew that she was deaf in terms of like the director, I'm sorry, the choreographers at that convention. This is the choreography pros convention. And so she was able to communicate like being able to see them when they're teaching versus like how like if you're teaching choreography and you're kind of facing the front. So I watched choreographers accommodate real time a disability there by like making sure that they were facing her when they were talking, um, making efforts to accommodate her. And she thrived during that whole convention. I think that's what I would like to see if there's an actual disability and you're aware of it. They express what their need, but that's a dance convention. It's not the same as an audition to be hired for a role on a team. Let's see. I will say this, there is a team that had a fully deaf NFL dancer. Accommodations are made when they want to. I think so. And this is again maybe accommodations that you make once the person's on the team, but what are the obligations and what's being really required in the audition context, because there really isn't even an employment relationship necessarily between the team and people who show up to auditions. Should you be prepared for anything that can come through the door in terms of like needing to have modified versions of routines in case people can't do certain elements? Like that's just something that I think teams should probably have conversations with to make sure that they are prepared for this type of scenario that could very easily play out. Um, I am aware, like, of teams making accommodations for, or encouraging that level of diversity again on their team, where they, based on talent, I'm assuming as well, select dancers that do have disabilities and are very open about it and share about, and then it's just something that they worked around it for this particular dancer for the 2022/23 season. She made the team. She's disclosed the disability. She made the team. I think she was on maybe the jazz team versus kind of like doing hip hop. But they featured her on YouTube. Like it sounds like accommodations were made. When you finish your season and you are in audition mode for your team, you may not have that employment relationship where there's that duty owed to you. But that's something that I think will be fleshed out, is whether or not they had a duty to accommodate somebody who may or may not have been an employee anymore because they were actually auditioning. And teams are going to have to figure out what, if any, adjustments they're willing to make in preparation for auditions if people aren't able to perform what you're asking of your dancers to perform. And if you cut them because they can't do it, are you opening yourself up to potentially having a disability discrimination claim? In California, aren't employers required to have the disability question on all applications? Somebody says yes. Um, I'm not a California barred attorney. I'm not even practicing anymore, but these are not aspects of the lawsuit that I researched. But there are, let's just say this, there are federal and state level legal requirements for employers. I don't know to what extent they apply to prospective employees, but I just think in the same way that you have like an application process for a job, you can't discriminate on the basis of disability. And probably similar, I guess the auditions is in that same vein. So I do think it's a reasonable question for teams to tackle internally, is like, what legal obligation do we have to make our auditions process accessible to those with disabilities? And that's not just physical disabilities, there's mental disabilities as well. So that's going to be an interesting one to watch play out from a legal perspective. Let me see if I'm forgetting anything. But essentially, let's get into retaliation because it ties everything together with a bow. I love the conversation. Feel free to keep chiming in. Because on the day of auditions, the dancers were kind of thrown off by this announcement that they were going in a different direction. They were kind of prepared for jazz. They changed it to hip hop. Why that's relevant, does it really speak to like retaliation that you flip the script on me because now you want to change dance styles? I don't really know that that's probably persuasive, but they're kind of like building this on the case that they were subsequently not selected for the team because they raised those claims of sexual harassment and their disability, and they felt they were discriminated against and retaliated against because they were not selected for the team. And they're seeking lost wages, benefits, damages for emotional distress, reasonable medical expenses, punitive damages, etc. And I don't. Oh, do you know why these teams are at will? Why can't multiple year contracts be established with dancers? Yeah, at will employment is a reality. I mean, I don't even know how few states aren't at will employers, but like, you know, I think even if there is a contract associated with the dancer's term on the team, like, then you'd have a stronger case around like termination, like to be wrongfully terminated or retaliated against in that situation. I think in our space, it's always been problematic that it is like audition process year to year where you can be cut and they can blame it on all kinds of things. It's all subjective, right? You have a judging panel and anything can happen. And depending on your season, if you were on the team before, what took place during that season, there can be all sorts. You can just get cut and you read between the lines as to why that might be, or you actually assert it in a legal claim. And this is the first that I'm seeing something along these lines where you're actually saying that by being cut in the audition process, that is a form of retaliation for issues that were raised during the season. California is an at-will state. However, there are different classifications that come into play. And again, this is all getting into employment law. It all depends on how we're even viewed as, like, these are issues that were raised from an employment perspective, around like our status as professional cheerleaders and dancers. I believe like there's a senator, California has a law where they specifically recognize professional cheerleaders and dancers as not to be classified as independent contractors because of them understanding that dancers were not being treated fairly and that teams were looking for an out to not provide those protections by these classifications of them to not be employees but to be independent contractors. A lot of this is legal analysis. I don't know who you are and maybe your legal background, but again, I'm not versed on California law in that way, but I do think there are certain things unique about this space where that termination or that employment relationship can be a little interesting because you have maybe your contract year in a sense of like when you're in season, but once you're in, like for Seahawks, for example, when I was on Seahawks, Seagulls, our contract or term under our like agreement that we signed to be a part of the team essentially ended when you showed up for auditions. So from that point forward, you are no longer an employee of the Seahawks organization. You are auditioning to be an employee of the Seahawks organization. But at that point, I think from a legal perspective, your obligations to that dancer as an employee have severed. And so in the audition context, I don't know what they're going to really be asserting as what's, truly a duty that the Sacramento Kings owed to these dancers when they were auditioning and not an actual employee at the time. Contract terminates in July for the Sacramento Kings dancers. So you're not an employee at that point. The allegations around sexual harassment, not gender discrimination, but the sexual harassment claims came maybe during the season, but in the moment while you're in the auditions process, that's why I say the gender discrimination claim is so interesting, because technically it's not an employee-employer relationship. All I can equate it to, though, again, is just like if you are applying for a job, you're not supposed to be discriminated against based on any of the things that we talked about earlier, right? Disability being one of them. And so I'm really curious how this would play out. I have friends that are employment lawyers, and I didn't get a chance to reach out to them to get their take, but I might run that past them and report back. Okay, people, that's the lawsuit. Again, I haven't had an opportunity to speak to the former director. I have not had an opportunity, nor am I like reaching out to people to see if they're willing to talk. I'm not an investigative reporter. I haven't reached out to Matthew Day. Once you're in active litigation, and that was the one statement from the Kings, is that they don't comment on active litigation. They take the allegations seriously. They haven't officially been served with a complaint. There's kind of due process. They have a right to respond. They have a right to kind of, build their case and assert the claims should be dismissed. I can't wait to follow up and see what they actually submit in that respect. The part that I'm going to shift a little bit in terms of gears here is because, kind of in the same spirit of doing the survey, I often, not too often, which is why I was kind of like, let me do the survey, but I sometimes hear from people who reach out to me anonymously, or just a vent or whatever about issues that they may be experiencing on their team. And I sit on a lot of that kind of communication. Sometimes they just want to vent. Sometimes, they want to be anonymous. Sometimes it's just like this podcast isn't really intended to kind of go on witch hunts and react to everything that I might hear. But when I hear multiple accounts that are similar in nature around a specific team, and especially in light of this lawsuit, I heard from people that were around allegations that are not even related to this lawsuit, but to me speak to like a bigger issue. I'm going to share high level what some of that feedback was. And again, I'm not on the Sacramento Kings dance team. I'm not their allegations, the same way that we talked about allegations from this lawsuit. I'm going to raise allegations that multiple dancers have reached out to me anonymously to address about the Sacramento Kings former coach, okay, former director, and the conduct that I think is almost more egregious than what I'm reading. Not that there's a comparison per se, but like just as troubling. Let's just say that, okay? All right. So this forum is open. If anybody wants to come on and share, or not even come on, if you want to reach out and share your perspective, if you're on the team, if you were on the team. But again, my goal is just to share the truth. People are trusting me with their story, sharing what they experience, and again, it's problematic. So here we go. Truth behind the palms. I am the messenger, but I stand behind what I share, because whenever I'm in this position, it's like I don't pounce on the first thing that comes my way or first whisperings. But I actually heard the first whisperings about the situation with the King's dancers several months ago. Before lawsuit, before, before any of this. So just so that you know, it's not like I'm just coming out of this other corner of my behind, okay? But at this point, I do think, based on the commonalities and what I'm hearing from people, it just should be addressed. And they're lucky that there isn't a lawsuit filed about some of these allegations, okay? And the reality is there's the truth. Something's true and something's false. So I'm not here to say which one's which, but it either happened or it didn't happen, the same way the allegations in this complaint happened or didn't happen. Some of the things that bubbled up to me about the former coach and the conduct was, I'll just start with the more egregious ones first. Just the racial discrimination in the language that was used toward the dancers that were Black, that were particularly on the 916 crew. I'm not giving specific examples or anything. I'm not going to get in the weeds of all of the information that came to me. I'm protecting people's identity. This is bubbled up high level, okay? But multiple corroborations of the same conduct. Allowing or being present for underage drinking. There are videos and pictures of this behavior that be backed up in terms of like partying with the team and kind of condoning that behavior. The body shaming, having that hostile work environment of communicating about people's bodies. In terms of just like the treatment of the Black dancers on the team, whitewashing their photos, insisting upon makeup that's not fitting of their, hold on, I thought I missed a comment, sorry. Just a lot of this is like unprofessionalism, but allegations of unprofessionalism, but talking negatively about other teammates to others who are on the team, communicating who you are cutting prior to auditions, not cleaning the 916 crew uniforms to the point of them growing mold, to them stinking, and they're not able to actually like stomach wearing a uniform that for I don't know how many games you have in the NBA season, 40 plus games, but if you're not washing the uniforms for whatever reason, the 916 crew wasn't, or I don't know if that would also apply to the Jazz dance team, but they weren't allowed to take their uniforms home we always care for our own uniforms. I don't know if you guys had that situation, but they weren't allowed to take their uniforms home, but they were not washed after each game. So I don't care what anybody says, like that would be disgusting and gross to sweat and wear a uniform for a game and then come back, you have multiple games in a week or what have you, and coming back and not having a clean uniform to wear. Just again, high level enough where I was just kind of like, this is in terms of like patterns of conduct and like a list of things that, to my understanding, several teammates kind of went through a similar experience and raised these issues with HR, with the King's organization. Like, to me, definitely could have been a lawsuit surrounding some of this behavior for sure. Um, I just think as a whole, I definitely have questions about, just the environment and culture with the organization. Um, like I said, she's no longer with the organization. I do think what I've heard, and it's just very problematic how things were run. You guys who are on the team know better than I do. I'm just like, again, sharing other people's truth that was shared with me that also was corroborated by multiple people saying similar things over a wider time frame. Nobody's on some sort of witch hunt for anybody, but the truth is the truth. We're talking about, these survey results and how people are treated on teams. I know that the Sacramento Kings aren't the only organization that has issues potentially with leadership or the way things are, like the culture of the team and how people are treated. I think when you have situations like this that rose to that level where they needed to go to HR, like, this is the type of behavior, and I'm so proud of the teammates who did try to address the issue and go to HR. It sounds like there was attention paid to the issues that were raised and that something was done about it. But I think in general, when we're looking at this lawsuit, when we're talking about things that are actually just they're actually just illegal. Like, this is 2023, and there just should be certain things that are just known to be unacceptable if you are leading a team in the NBA. Of all, like, when you think about like high visibility leagues like the NBA, NFL, and what can be kind of like going on underneath the surface, and then you think of like just our whole ecosystem, like spotlights on these major teams. So I think the standard is should be really high as to how these teams are being managed and how the dancers are treated and take and there's just certain behavior that is not, it's a no-brainer. Like, you just don't do it. It's not acceptable. You're lucky if you can be in role and treat people poorly and actually keep your job. But ultimately, I'm calling a spade in terms of what I've seen and heard. And again, there's no lawsuit associated with this behavior and conduct, but it's just very, very problematic. And again, I have heard from people from different teams keeping it under wraps because they're not really sure how they want to bring it forward. I don't, sometimes unfortunately, when people just have to be called to the carpet, it is what it is. Like, right is right and wrong is wrong. And you can't treat people that way and expect for the truth not to come to light at some point, right? People talk, people raise and advocate for themselves the same way that I advocate for myself. I think the team, hopefully, you guys as a whole are realizing that you don't have to put up with this type of behavior and that you are advocating for yourself to address it because nobody deserves to be treated that way. I appreciate the transparency, but having a conversation with the director is definitely wanted so that you have both sides of the story as opposed to one sided. Let me explain to you why I agree with you. Um, but this is where there's just kind of like, uh, I don't know if you're new to the podcast, but my role is not to kind of go digging for truth. It's like an open door where people are able to come to me. The communication, and I really wasn't going to go here, but I think you're kind of driving at a point to suggest um, that it warrants an opportunity to have both sides heard. I heard from the director, and if you heard my rant earlier today, she specifically told me not to bring her up tonight. And I don't take kindly to people telling me what to do and what I can and can't talk about. This is an open forum. If she wants to address anything that came out, she wasn't even really named in the lawsuit. So I don't even know why she addressed me and trying to tell me what not to talk about and saying her name. I didn't even have any intention of needing to talk about her in that capacity. But based on what I have heard from other people, and again, multiple accounts from other people, yes, there is another side to the story, but it's not my job or my responsibility to try to enforce her to have a conversation with me. She reached out in a way that was very like attempting to be intimidating to tell me what I can and can't talk about. If she wants to come and talk to me, open door, but you're not going to tell me what I can and can't discuss on my platform. hopefully that answers your concern. The new team looks amazing, proud of the professionalism and new look of the team. Um, no, that's great. And like I said, the leadership change, she's not in role. Understand and thank you for the clarification. Absolutely. Like I'm an open book, you guys. It's truth bomb. I don't have anything to be afraid of. I'm not. I think everybody who has any allegations raised against them, this is there's a such thing as due process, right? Like you have a right to defend yourself. And obviously, in situations where there has been an actual lawsuit filed, you're probably going to be a little careful in the way that you try to defend yourself. I don't know Matthew Day from Adam, but they're at this point, because it's an actual active litigation matter, he's, he's probably not going to reach out and be like, hey, can I come tell my side of the story on your podcast? I'm not going to even ask that because, like, even from speaking to the media, having quotes, it's active litigation at this point. Anything that you say, you need to be consulting with your lawyer. Like, it's not, it sounds easier said than done to defend yourself when people are, making allegations about you. This is an open forum if they wanted to do that. But again, like I'm presenting again information, and to frame it up again is how I started this conversation. My platform is intended to be a vehicle where people feel safe in raising things that they may not be able to say directly because they're on a team, maybe because they're concerned about their career and being able to dance for a team again in the future. And so I'm the messenger in that way. And I might put my little 2 cents on top because I do try to look at things from all angles. But I also know just from covering this space for so long that, like, for example, with the Dallas Cowboy cheerleader situation, when the executive was peeping into the dressing room where they were changing, is there his side of the story, another perspective to evaluate? Perhaps. But to me, sometimes things are just like, just, you don't do that shit kind of a situation. And I don't really like tiptoe through the tulips on calling a spade in those situations. And again, multiple accounts where there's smoke, there's fire. And I clearly saw a tactic in terms of like this intimidation to speak. I don't even know what that was about. Like, I really don't, but wrong move. But that's not what this forum is for. If she wants to address any of the things that have come out from people who've been on her dance team or whatever, doors wide open. There's no lawsuit that you have to kind of tiptoe around. People are raising collective issues, like again, multiple accounts of issues with that leadership. And she's no longer there, so it's we can cry over spilled milk or not. But the main reason that I'm bringing this up, especially in the context of the survey results, is that clearly the Sacramento Kings Dancers is not the only organization out there that is experiencing issues. And I'm not trying to even push that everybody should go run and find the latest labor attorney. I think this attorney may represent the dancers who are suing Lizzo, and I'm not even suggesting that. I do think if you are, like I said, experiencing some of these types of issues on teams, document the situation. Definitely, trying to address it directly. But if the director is part of the larger cultural problem or condoning behavior, then it is a step to go to HR and try to raise these issues and concerns and have them bubble up within the organization, because you guys could be running to, an article that's going to be like this big shablam. Like, I've seen it over the past 5 years. When I first started the podcast, there were articles with different people just looking for a sensational headline, like NFL cheerleaders sue for this, for that. Like, it doesn't, you can either shame your organization by going and talking to the media and having it be the latest headline. You can go the lawsuit route and sue your team, or you can try your best if you're on these teams to try to like have these issues addressed with the HR department by having well documented and communicating with your teammates and like really standing together to stand up for what's right. I just am going to end with, I hope that that's for people who are experiencing these issues, if they're that systemic and they're really rooted around the leadership in the sense that they are condoned or perpetrated by the person in that leadership position, you could suffer in silence You could get so jaded to the point where you decide, I cannot wait to be done with this team when I retire. And you can retire and swear off that team and have this negative experience of your time as a professional cheerleader dancer. And you can have your whole experience ruined. Or you can try your best to fight for what's right, especially for people who come after you. I think it's just something that everybody has to decide what's best for them. But I don't give in to, like I said, intimidation around like speaking up on things. And I do think you guys have a collective power. You got tons of episodes about unionization that you guys can go back and reference. If that's not the path that we're going to go in this space where we collectively as a whole create some standards as to how we expect to be treated and what's like acceptable, unacceptable, then at least as a team, you guys can collectively come together to address things that you do not think that you know are not right. It's not like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. My son just made me watch that the other day. Anyway, it's not, I think it's a little more like stark, right or wrong, just the way that I formed the questions in the survey. So I would just ask you guys to really think about your position on a team and not letting anybody take your experience on these teams and essentially ruin it, because of like mismanagement or harassment or discrimination. Like, don't put up with that shit. Some of the behavior is just flat out illegal. And again, it's either going to rise to the form of a lawsuit or something that HR departments, legal departments, like, let's just be real. I've said it to different people who've written in about like advice. HR sometimes protects the organization, but if you really want to get your point across and really raise something that is that egregious, you reach out to the legal department. Because the legal department, I will say, as an attorney, in-house especially, you serve as counsel to the company. So if you come into knowledge of an issue that's going on within the organization, that's just your role as in-house counsel. Okay, your job is to look into it and protect and cover your ass to make sure that they are not breaking the law. And there's a little bit of a different impetus to act when you know that inaction has legal ramifications. Like sexual harassment claims 101 is that you raise the issue and the organization does nothing about it. So I'm not saying don't go to HR. I'm saying go to HR and copy the general counsel. Like, there's just ways of getting the right attention to the issues that you might be raising, where if you're going to have to go over somebody's head, you might as well go over it in a way that gets the attention that's going to squash it, because I can guarantee no legal counsel, general counsel for an NBA team or NFL team wants to see their team smattered across a Yahoo article, ESPN, like similar to how this lawsuit, there's like tons of news outlets picking it up. They want to avoid that as much as possible. So I think your issues and concerns will be heard with a little bit of a different lens of accountability and responsibility if legal is also looped into the conversation. Because then they're on notice and record, and that's not something in discovery that you would want to have appear as a smoking gun. The dancers emailed HR, copied legal, laying out the issues, and they did nothing. Just saying, something to think about. I said what I said tonight. I stand firm on it. On everything that I said. And again, I appreciate everybody who's willing to share. I'm sure there are different accounts from people who are on the team who had a completely different experience or didn't experience any of these things that I'm raising tonight. Again, I'm trying to keep the confidentiality and privacy of people who have reached out. I would, to get too nitty gritty with it. But if you want to reach out, you can. If you want to, I'm not going to chase down talking to anybody, but I also will not be intimidated by anybody to speak on what I do know from multiple sources. That is the cheer chat for tonight. I talked for an hour and 45 minutes, but you guys have stayed with me and I appreciate all of the participation. I want your thoughts on the follow-up points that we talked about. Dancers deserve to be happy in these spaces. It is a sacred space. I could not agree more. And I've said it so many times that you guys work so hard. You're so talented. You know, you make it through this very difficult process of making it onto these professional teams. This is a very unique space, and it bothers me to no end that you guys would actually make it onto these teams, be selected in this like such it should be the best time of your lives. And no, it's not going to be perfect. You might have favorites or you might have like some more minor inconveniences or things that aren't fair about this experience. But overall, it should not be a situation where you are mistreated. You deserve better than that. And I just will always stand firm on that. Period. You deserve that. You've earned that. It is a very special place. It's a beautiful place. Our survey results do not reflect that in all times, but let's keep talking about what's not present, what needs to change. We can have those conversations together and hope that it ultimately makes a difference for people to know that they're not alone and for people to have a little bit of like, if you're doing this bullshit, you're going to possibly get called out about it. Okay. And again, I'm not on anybody's witch hunt, but you might want to clean up your act, period, point blank, end of story, because I don't know how you could expect to keep your jobs if you're running the teams in these ways. That's all I got, you guys. Thanks for listening. The door is and the floor is open to anybody who wants to join me and share their experience or just talk through maybe what they've gone through with their team. And all of this is with hope that the situation will improve and get better for everybody. That is my TED Talk. I'm going to finish my rosé. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for being a part of this community and trusting me with your stories and experiences and your truth. And the door is open for anybody else. Good night, you guys. I'll talk to you later.